The tension between Lucía and Don Ramiro reached its peak. He couldn't accept that a child had defied him, that she had touched Fury when no one else dared. He tried to intimidate her, but Lucía remained unshaken. One evening as the sun dipped low, Don Ramiro stormed into the stable, fury in his eyes. He was going to do something that would end it all, or so he thought. He raised his hand to strike, but before he could, Fury stepped between them. Lucía stood there, her hands clenched at her sides. She didn't need to speak. Fury had already made his choice. The ranchers couldn't ignore it anymore. Lucía had proven something they had all been too afraid to see. She had tamed the beast, not with force but with understanding. She had shown them that fear wasn't something to be controlled, it was something to overcome. Don Ramiro, defeated and humiliated, retreated into silence. His wealth no longer mattered. The ranch was his, but it was no longer a place of power. Lucía had taken that from him. Years later, Lucía stood in front of the ranch, her heart no longer bound by fear. Fury was gone, but the lesson he taught her remained. Sometimes the greatest challenge isn't what we face on the outside, but what we face within ourselves. Fear, pride, and power are just illusions. It's the quiet moments, the ones that test our hearts, that define us. Lucía had touched the horse, but in doing so, she had touched something much greater, herself. And that, she knew, was the true victory. Moral lesson asterisk. Fear isn't something to run from. It's something to understand and face head-on. It was one of those days when the sun felt too hot, and the dust from the road clung to everything. The air smelled thick with the scent of old leather, cattle, and sweat. Lucía, just a child of 12, carried a bucket of water to the stables. Her legs trembled beneath her, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of knowing she didn't belong there. She worked in silence, doing what she had to, while the world around her was a game for the rich. At the main house, Don Ramiro sat on his porch with his guests. The laughter and clinking glasses were so loud, they carried through the open windows. But Lucía couldn't care less about the noise. She had seen this all before. The ranch was his world and everyone else was just part of the scenery. One guest's voice rang louder than the others. "I'll give you my 10 million ranch if you touch that horse." The rancher laughed, his voice echoing like a whip. The challenge was nothing new. But this time something in Lucía shifted. She knew exactly which horse they were talking about. Fury. A beast no one dared to come near. The air grew thick with tension and Lucía stood frozen, her breath catching in her chest. She didn't understand the challenge, but she knew something about it. This wasn't just about a horse. It was about proving something. To everyone. And maybe to herself. The next morning, Lucía woke up earlier than usual. The sky outside was still dim, the early light casting long shadows across the dusty land. The ranch had a different feel today, like something was about to change. She could hear the men from the day before still talking in the background, laughing about the ridiculous dare they had thrown. But Lucía wasn't interested in their jokes. She couldn't stop thinking about the horse. Fury was more than just an animal locked in the corral. Fury was a symbol, a thing to fear, and to Lucía that was exactly why she couldn't look away. "Lucía, don't leave the kitchen today," her mother's voice broke through her thoughts. Lucía glanced up from her chores and nodded. Her mother didn't want her getting into trouble. But Lucía's mind was already set. The temptation to prove herself was too great. Maybe it was the way they laughed at her. Or the way they treated her like she was invisible. She grabbed her old apron, slipped out the back door and walked towards the stables without saying a word. When Lucía reached the corral, she saw Fury. He was the largest horse she had ever seen, his dark coat blending with the shadows. His eyes, wild and untamed, seemed to pierce through the distance. Lucía could feel her heart racing, but she didn't turn back. The ranchers always talked about Fury like he was something to be feared. Some said he was dangerous. Some said he was cursed. But Lucía knew one thing: they didn't know him. She took a deep breath and walked closer, the dry grass crunching under her feet. Fury's ears twitched and he raised his head, eyes locking onto hers. She froze for a moment, but then something inside her made her take another step forward. "I'm not afraid of you," she whispered. The horse snorted, his body tense, but he didn't move. Lucía reached out, her fingers brushing against the wooden fence. There was no turning back now. Days passed and Lucía kept going back to the stable. Every day she came a little closer to Fury. Some days he would simply watch her. Other days he would move, but always with a warning in his stance. Yet Lucía never backed down. The laughter of the ranchers never stopped. They mocked her, calling her foolish. "What's a little girl like her going to do with a horse like that?" they'd say, and the men would laugh. But with every laugh, Lucía's resolve grew stronger. Her mother warned her to stay away, but Lucía couldn't stop. Something about Fury's silence, his pain, spoke to her. It was like they shared something. An understanding no one else could see. Then came the day that changed everything. Lucía was in the kitchen, helping her mother when she overheard the ranchers laughing again. But this time, Don Ramiro's voice stood out. "I'll give you my 10 million ranch if you touch that horse." Lucía stood still, her hands frozen in place. The challenge was back. But this time it felt different. The ranchers' laughter was louder, mocking, as if daring someone to prove them wrong. She couldn't let it go. This was her moment. Without thinking, Lucía ran outside, her heart pounding in her chest. She was tired of being invisible, of being looked down upon. She was tired of hiding. She had to show them all that she was not afraid. The crowd gathered by the corral, their eyes full of curiosity and mockery. Lucía stood at the edge, her hand gripping the rough wooden fence. Don Ramiro looked at her, his expression filled with amusement. "So, the little girl wants to prove something?" he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Lucía didn't answer. She just looked at Fury, who was already watching her from the other side of the fence. This was it. This was the challenge that would define her. She took a step forward, the crowd falling silent. Fury's eyes followed her every movement. Lucía didn't flinch. She could feel her heart racing, but she didn't back down. Slowly she reached out, her fingers trembling. The crowd held its breath. The air seemed to freeze as Lucía extended her hand towards the horse. Fury snorted, his body tense. For a moment time stood still. Everyone watched, waiting for the horse to charge, for Lucía to be thrown back. But instead, something unexpected happened. Fury took a step back, lowering his head. Lucía's breath caught in her throat. Was he backing down? She stepped closer, this time reaching the gate. Fury moved again, but this time he didn't act in anger. He simply looked at her. Lucía's hand brushed against his mane. The world seemed to hold its breath as she touched him. For the first time, Fury didn't react with fear or aggression. Instead, there was something almost peaceful in his gaze. The silence that followed was deafening. Don Ramiro stood frozen, his face pale. The ranchers exchanged glances, some in disbelief, others in awe. Lucía stood there, her hand still on Fury's neck. She didn't speak, but her heart was pounding in her chest. She had done it. She had proven them all wrong. Don Ramiro's voice broke the silence. "Impossible," he muttered. His pride had been shattered, and he didn't know how to react. Lucía looked up, meeting his gaze for the first time. There was no laughter in her eyes, no fear. Just a calm certainty. She had done what no one else could. She had tamed the untamable. As the days passed, things began to change. Lucía no longer felt the weight of the ranchers' mockery. They whispered behind her back, but there was a new respect in their voices. Don Ramiro, however, couldn't let it go. His pride had been hurt, and he would do anything to regain his control. One afternoon he called Lucía to the corral again. "You think you're special, don't you?" he sneered. "But I'm still the one who controls this place." Lucía looked at him, her heart steady. "You don't control anyone," she said quietly. "Not even me."